Hi, Drew. Thanks for joining us on the Wonder podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
As I was saying before, I have an agenda. I think we can do so much more with education, and I really want to shine a spotlight on teachers and all the work that they do that largely goes unnoticed, so that we
Yeah,
can have a better conversation.
perfect. Sounds good to me.
Do you want to tell us a bit about you?
I'm a primary school teacher. I've been teaching for around 12 or 13 years. I started teaching in London in a primary school in Fulham in London, and then I relocated back to Liverpool and have been teaching here for 10 years since. So I did my training in Kingston, which is obviously near London as well, and then did some teaching practice in London, and then have been in Liverpool as well. Both schools were really different. So my school in London was quite an inner city school, quite a lot of poverty, and a huge diverse community, lots of different religions, lots of different nationalities. And I've come to school in Liverpool, which is in quite a, I suppose, like a middle class area, you'd call it, outside of the city. But it's a lovely school, quite a big school. We're a fourth elementary, so we've got 840 pupils in our primary school. Really supportive families. And yeah, it's a world away from the school I was in London.
And when you say worlds away, what most jumps out at you?
Well, I think I think teaching has changed anyway over the time I've been within school. But for example, this school that I'm in now, it's a lot of people are trying to get their kids into the school because it's got a good reputation. In the school in London, we were right in the middle of a housing estate with a block of flats, so it was basically the kids who lived in those flats came to our school. And yeah, we had supportive parents in the school I was in London as well, definitely. But there was a lot more poverty around that school. A lot of younger parents, so therefore you're getting a different sort of cohort of kids coming in. Some children who are from really large families, whereas, as I say, the school I'm in now, it's a lot of these children are born into more privilege than the children that I was working with in London.
And how did that affect the way you would run your day or your year?
Well, it hasn't really. It hasn't changed how I, um, you know, treat the children, or it hasn't changed what we cover, but it's probably changed how you would plan for the abilities, because we would have in the school in London, it was a higher SEN proportion than we've got in our school now. So we still have a fairly high SEND percentage of children in our school, but the needs are less severe, and a lot of our SEND children are still achieving great things. Whereas in the school I was in previously, it was the children needed a lot more support, and that's just a generalisation, because there are obviously children that we've got currently who maybe need that additional support and additional adults and things. Um, but as a whole, a lot of our SEND pupils in my current school are still achieving end of year expectations and are making vast progress and things.
And what matters most to you right now with what you see?
So for me, I'm an EYFS teacher at the moment. I'm going up to year one next year, but I have been in EYFS for, I think this is my 10th academic year in EYFS. And for me, my main goal, and it always has been, is to get the children settled into school life, to get them happy, to make sure they're happy, to build up friendships, to build up relationships, to develop those skills of, problem solving and sort of navigating friendships, which can obviously be quite tricky when they're younger. And that is my aim, really, is for them to be happy and feel safe and feel comfortable. And obviously then when they feel that, then the academic side comes after that, and that's something we have really taken the approach of as a team. As I say, it's a large team that we've got in my school at the moment, because obviously it's such a large intake that we have. But it's something that we've always set. You know, the first half term is no lessons. It's just, you know, there might be like little lessons here and there, but it's all about getting those kids settled, getting them comfortable with us, and as a result, you build up good relationships with those pupils. You can support them with their friendships and things. And I think that for me has always been my focus. Obviously, it's great when they're achieving good results, but for me, it's about getting them settled and getting them happy. And obviously, I'm speaking with an EYFS head on here, so an early years head. Um, you know, thinking about like those pupils, and then obviously as they go up through the school, I'm sure there's different focuses at play, but my aim is to sort of put those foundations in place for them, so that then they feel happy, they feel comfortable, they know their own ability, they can celebrate their successes. They're not, you know, completely burdened by any mistakes or failures they make. It's about them getting back up and, you know, trying again, building that resilience. And yeah, that's my sort of thing, I suppose.
Somebody, a friend was sharing one of those memes with me today, where way back when it would have been, you know, the parents saying, "Why did you get this grade?" Whereas now it's sort of reversed, and children are mollycoddled a lot more.
Yeah.
Why is their happiness so important to you and what you're doing?
I think that children, as I say, I've been teaching about 13 years. Like the years have all blurred into one, to be honest. It escaped me with the exact number, but I think even teaching in that time, we've seen such a huge change socially, culturally, and I think one of the big changes that I've seen is um, in the past, parents were more. How can I word this? Parents were more on your side as a teacher, and if you said this has happened, it would be siding with you. Whereas I think now children have a lot more influence over their parents, which is not necessarily me saying it's a bad thing or it's a good thing. But I think what happens is because the children are given more free reign, if you will, and their their voice is constantly listened to, which is obviously in many ways a good thing. I think what happens, or what we've noticed as teachers, and I'm speaking on obviously for myself, and I'm speaking on behalf of the team, and you know, a school where we have to have conversations about this quite a lot, is um, because children are given so much say and so much freedom, in a sense where it's, you know, this is what I want for my dinner and things. They have found boundaries quite hard to navigate, and sometimes I think that can actually emotionally dysregulate them. So I think the freedom that they're sometimes given, which again, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because there's some great things that come from those freedom, but sometimes a lack of boundaries in place can leave them feeling a little bit, when they come to somewhere like a school, they don't know how to interact, they don't know how to share, they're finding it tricky to build friendships. If someone says no, it's the end of their world, and you know, it becomes, you know, a huge emotional issue for them. So for me, it's about building those boundaries, and I think those boundaries create safety for the children and create a happiness, which is going to be different to the happiness they have at home, because obviously at home they've got more freedom, they can do what they want when they want. They've not, you know, they might not have to share their toys and things, but obviously in a school setting, we're establishing those things that are becoming less and less, I suppose, put in place at home, which is not, again, not always the case. But I think for us, what we find is that creates a safety for the children, and they feel safe with us because they know what the rules are, they know what the boundaries are, and it creates for better friendships and things.
I have a 9-year-old daughter, and
Okay.
if I was to ever tell her what to do, her automatic response is, "But Daddy, you told me I can do whatever I want to do."
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I get from a lot of parents as well. So I don't have any children myself, so I'm coming from it from a different angle as well. But from the parents we get, oh, they leave their room in a mess, and they never tidy anything away, they don't do anything at home. But for us in school, because those routines are established, and it's not so much you will do this because I've said so. It's we've got to do this to work as a team. If we don't do this, we're not going to have the resources. If you don't put your lids on your pens, then they're going in the bin and the pens aren't getting replaced. It's having those sort of rules in place, and for them to understand that. So at the beginning of the year, and we do this in every year group, we come up with class rules collectively, and it's about the good of everyone. So it's not just I'm not going to leave my mess and walk off to another area, because then that's going to take it's going to impact other children, and it's going to impact how much time they have to play and things. So just having those rules in place in the school setting, which aren't necessarily they're not necessarily needed at home, but in a school setting, it's very important, and obviously it prepares them as they go up through school and eventually into working life, to have those sort of routines and that understanding, I suppose, in place.
So beyond that conversation that you have at the beginning, what other tools and techniques do you have in your toolbox to help set those healthy boundaries?
Um, Well, it's conversations. It's obviously our PSHE curriculum, or PSED as we call it in reception. It's regularly teaching. It's having the children reflect on things that they've done. So if there's been a behaviour incident, having them reflect on how that's made the other person feel, how that makes them feel in that current moment, and understanding it. And then what we find is we have less repetitive behaviour. If it's negative specifically, um, because that's they've got an understanding of why I did that, because I was frustrated. That person now feels sad. I feel sad. This is how I could have dealt with it better. And we generally find it does work. It might happen a few times. It might happen then sporadically over the time, over the course of the year or whatever. But it does lessen drastically, because I think that it's understanding the implications of things on themselves and on others as well.
What are you looking forward to in your career from here? You're now well tenured.
Yeah.
What,
Um,
where's your growth come in?
well, I mean, to be honest, it's for me. I've not got desires to go further within teaching. I'm a class teacher, and I'm quite happy doing that. I've no desires to be in senior management or anything like that. It's just not something I've really ever strived for. And all these years in, despite obviously acquiring a lot of knowledge and things, I still feel like I'm probably best used in the classroom. If more funding and things were available, in the past I used to do a lot of work with families. So if there was maybe emotional issues with children and things, we'd have families in, and I do a lot of work with the families and the children at the same time. If children were particularly struggling with certain subjects, I had workshops that I ran for maths and literacy, and that would be with different year groups as well. And I really enjoyed that sort of work. Unfortunately, now there's the funding is so dramatically cut. There's not funding for me to really be out of class. I'd love to look into certain areas more. I'm PSHE lead in my school, and I think there's a lot within PSHE. It's an ever-changing subject. I think it's something that I could I've got a really good understanding of, but I constantly want to further that understanding, so it can be related to teaching or any other things, I suppose, that were to come my way. But it's the funding, and it's having time to sort of get out on these courses. It's having time to take on that project. It's having time to do those sorts of things. So yeah, it's just a shame, really, that I feel more and more is being taken away from educators, from education system in general. Lots more is being taken away, and little's being given back, really.
And so that funding, was that like reallocated somewhere, or?
I think it's funding that schools had available. So in the past, I would go on quite a lot of courses, whereas now there's just not, the school hasn't got the funding to do it. So there's, it may be, in the past, some of the funding might have come from pupil premium, and I know now it's quite hard so to establish who are pupil premium, because up until year 2, the children all get free school meals anyway. So that's some funding that's gone. Obviously, with the energy prices and things, schools are having to find money from elsewhere within their budgets to cover the rising costs of that, which is crazy, really, because, obviously these big companies are making huge amounts of money, and school are then scrambling to find this money, and then cuts are being made to maybe CPD or maybe to your resources in your classrooms and things. And I mean, my school hasn't got it as bad as some other schools. There are still things, that have been cut, as we say, like I say, that, opportunities to further develop, to further develop my passions within the school have not been able to happen. But it's just cuts from every direction, and it's been like that for quite some time now.
And so you talked about continuous professional development, or continuing professional development. How much did you used to do, and how much are you able to do now?
So we do a lot of in-house. So it's more. So I might do some stuff around PSHE within our staff meetings. Staff may do stuff about maths within, the maths team may do stuff, and then there may be occasionally time allocated for us to come out of class and to go and see other people teaching. But in regards to doing courses and going out and sort of visiting other placements, other schools, visiting experts, it has dramatically cut. So I would, I can't really put a specific thing on it, but an example would be, in the past I did a literacy course called building a bridge of books. So, and there was training on that. So I think I did 6 sessions, and then after those 6 sessions, I ran 6 sessions with parents and pupils, and then we then furthered it on more, where I brought other families in to do it as well. Same with a math scheme called Make It Count. I did 6 training sessions where I was out for 6 days. I then did 6 training sessions within the school. So all of this is obviously time out of class, where that is just not available anymore, because obviously the cost of supply increases, and there's just not the availability to do that. So a lot of our CPD would be taken on, I suppose, by ourselves. It may be learning from people that you work alongside. Maybe if you've got friends outside who are teachers, and they might offer advice on certain things you're covering. But it's definitely drastically lessened.
And where would you allocate resources if you had a clean slate?
Well, everywhere, really. I mean, I do think CPD is important for staff. I think it's important, if you've got a passion, that should be able to be built on, especially if it's of benefit to the school, especially the whole school. I think that would be useful. I do think resources in classrooms. I mean, as I say, our school is not so bad, but I know friends who are buying their own pens, buying their own paper, taking pencils into school. I know people are doing that. So just your everyday essentials, it would be, useful for. God, you could just go on forever. I mean, books, people have run out of books and have to order their own books and things. Resources like, providing extra enhancements for different subjects. So, like with reading, obviously more books in your reading areas, having a budget to create a decent area within your class, even just the upkeep of schools, iPads and things. There's something that we're going to need these children are going to need as a job. There's that saying, isn't there? But something like 85% of jobs that the current cohort will have are jobs we don't even know about yet. And you can see that happening quicker and quicker with, obviously, when I started, it was more like social media and things like that. And you see that change, and, even how for example, my telly's all through Wi-Fi now, and if your Wi-Fi's down, your telly's off, and different things in your house don't work. And with the introduction of AI, you can just see how that's speeding up and coming in more and more. So having useful ICT that they can access rather than iPads from 10 years ago, or even longer in some cases. It would be beneficial if all pupils maybe had an iPad or a laptop or something. But because realistically, as much as I place a huge value on writing, phonics and those sort of things that would link to it, there is going to be less of a need for you to have neat handwriting when you're older. Everything is going to be going through these systems. And I know it is, I'm not taking away the importance, because it is still vitally important. But I do feel, if we were to look in 50 years' time, I think the world will be running completely differently, and therefore schools will have to adapt to that. And sometimes I think schools and what we need to cover is quite often outdated. There's a bit of a restriction on certain things that you can cover, or if you do cover, there's maybe controversy around that. But I think ICT is one of those things that we are going to have to accept, that it's, whether we like it or not, whether it's something that people of our age are familiar with or find it tricky, it is going to be something that these kids that I'm teaching now, and obviously children I've even taught in the past, it's going to be such a huge part of their lives going forward. I mean, we use our phones for everything, don't we? Without your phone, you don't know what your day looks like. All my appointments are scheduled in my calendar on my phone. So if my phone goes, I haven't got my appointments. And and I'm not an avid tech user. I'm not someone who's constantly on tech, but that's just an example. So I think the world is just changing so quickly, and I don't know if schools have got the funding, or even the ability as well, with restrictions put in place to adapt to those changes that are coming so quickly.
Would you say the funding situation leaves a lot of teachers in survival mode or in crisis?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I've got to speak from my perspective. In my school, I, as I say, I am in quite a fortunate position, but I know friends who are teaching in other schools who are, who are just desperately trying to get through, and there's things going on. Has anyone got, any offices got paper they can donate to our school and things like that? And you think, education is so important, and people are asking on a Facebook status for reams of paper, or has anyone got any toys that they can donate for our home area, or and we do that to a certain degree, where we say, oh, can you, we're doing some planting this week, could you bring some seeds in, have you got some spare pots, things like that. But I know people who are really up dire straits with it in many ways, who are just having to sort of pull from every which angle and direction, and just try and take what they can and make the best with it. Using old resources and things that are outdated, but then all these brilliant new initiatives are coming in, but then schools haven't got the funding to buy into them and stuff. So I do think it's creating quite a, with all the will in the world, if you haven't got the stuff to do it, how are you meant to do it to the best? You can do it to the best of your ability with what you've got, but there are many things that could make it a lot easier and a lot, I suppose, more enhanced.
You mentioned new initiatives. Any that come to mind?
Well, I'm speaking from, again, with my EYFS head on, different ideas of, sort of letting children. I mean, this is not a new idea, but I'm just thinking of a scheme I've read about, which I obviously won't name, but things about like letting the children have free access. So you just give them the props, they go away and do it. But the thing is these props, which we've had in the past, so things like wooden sticks, canes, all of those sort of things, they all need replacing. So you might have things for a year, but then after that year, the resources break through wear and tear, through inexperienced children using these things that maybe they've never used outside of school before because they've maybe been used to using more tech things or whatever. Even with for example, with those iPads and stuff, it's and laptops and things, it's these things all need replenishing, but it's the lack of funding that you can't then replenish. So, you might be saying, oh, build this den with these broken sticks and these broken pegs which have stuck together with some gaffer tape and things. And, it's not really how education should be being ran, is it? Education is we want to provide these children with the best possibilities that we can. And obviously that's why teachers have gone into the profession. They've not gone in to do it half-hearted, or we want to provide the best experience for the kids, but there's only so much you can do when you've not got the things you need to provide the best experiences.
So going back to that question, if you had a blank sheet of paper and you were tasked with providing the best possible education, what would be the top 3 things on that list?
So I think for me, if we were sort of scrapping the schooling system in general, I think my main thing would be a huge focus on PSHE. So I feel, for me personally, I feel that PSHE, and as a topic, as a subject in general, it's just given half an hour a week. It's where people can fit it in. PSHE is everything that you do. It's children's approach to work. It's children's approach to friendships. It's their, it's their families. It's their home life. And I feel that if there was more free time within a timetable, and it was more your PSHE, maybe, we have a scheme that we follow, but if there, and that would be great for your set lesson, I suppose. But if there was more of a, go with what the children want, follow those conversations, have those, let them lead that conversation, let that influence what you're going to do in your class the next day. If there was more of a free reign with that, I think that would be hugely beneficial. And that's obviously not diminishing the importance of maths and literacy and science and all these other subjects, which are hugely important. But I do feel that you would still be able to do those subjects if there was more of a free reign, and if we had the time to sit and listen to the children, if there wasn't such a rigid timetable where there are things that every year group have to cover, and it's mandatory you cover them, and there is only 6 teaching hours a day, and you've got to fit that in. So some things get put to the bottom of the pile because they have to. But I do feel, and I'm speaking from it obviously as a leader PSHE, I do feel that so much more emphasis should be put on that, because I feel if the child is happy, and if they feel heard, if they feel understood, if there are conversations had, even if they're uncomfortable conversations about behaviour and things like that, then I feel like it would create for children who are then more able to access the learning. It would build confidence, so they would have that ability to work more independently and things like that. So that would be my first thing. I think secondly, it would be having that strong relationship. I mean, we do in our school, I know it's not always the case, but having that strong family relationship where, families are a part of their child's learning, but we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. I'd love to have more of an ability to, for parents to be involved in their child's learning more. But what we find is obviously a lot of parents are busy. We can set activities that are related to our learning. Some people do it, some people don't. And that's not naming and shaming people. That's just because people's lives are so busy. But that is, again, outside of the control of the teachers. We quite often have set tasks that are related to learning, that are the learning that we are doing in class, and it's to follow on that at home. And sometimes it doesn't get done because parents are busy, again, children refusing to do stuff at home that they would be happy to do in school. So again, with the different boundaries and things. So I think maybe if there was closer links with that, and maybe that ability to sort of have parents in a bit more frequently, have them come and, show them how we would read with children. And again, this is not something I'm saying my school doesn't do. We do it we do things where we have parents in and we teach them. But if there was just more of a, I suppose, an open door thing where it was like, this is what we're doing today, feel free to come in while we go over here, that sort of thing. And I think finally, I suppose I kind of touched on this before, it would be listening to the children's interests and allowing that to sort of have a big influence on the teaching that goes on in class. As I say, the curriculum is so rigid and there's certain things that need to be covered, which you think, how is that going to be relevant? I mean, I'm thinking just for myself as a teacher, and this is, a generalized thing, which I'm sure most people have said, but, there's so much time spent on things like algebra, but I've never used algebra since I've left school. And I think, there are certain people that will, certain occupations that will require that, but that is going to be so few and far between. So I feel like the curriculum could just do with a complete overhaul, and actually think, in this day and age, is this relevant? To me, over algebra, I would be rather teaching children about, exposing children to things that are going on in our local communities, discussing things like discrimination, having more time for a conversation around discrimination over something like algebra, which probably 29 of the 30 children in the class won't have to use after they've left school. I know I'm speaking, obviously, algebra is more high school level, but that again, just thinking back to my own personal experience with schooling, just having more time for those things that crop up, when there's stuff going on in the news, having time for discussions about that, and not being worried that, oh, if I say this, is that going to cause offence? Am I going to offend someone in
So
the class?
would you
But
say there's gaps in the curriculum, or having the curriculum is just very limiting?
I think that the curriculum is in many parts of the curriculum, not all, but in many parts of the curriculum, there's some great things in there that have to be covered. It's your basics of what you need. But there are some things in there that I don't see the relevance in being covered today, because I don't see how it would benefit the majority of the children. And I feel the curriculum is so tailored to your high achieving children. High achieving children are probably going to fly through a lot of it. Then you've got maybe some children who are maybe not so great at maths and maybe not so great at writing and things, and their specialities may lie in their knowledge around history. And if you had more ways of exploring it where it wasn't so, this needs to be down on a piece of paper and it's more experiential, I suppose. I think the curriculum can be limiting, and I suppose, yeah, I would say there were gaps in it as well. And I think the gaps are having time to bring children on. We talk, and again, this is probably not so much related to primary school. Economics is a part of the PSHE curriculum, but it's a small part. But getting into high school over algebra, wouldn't it be great to have children who are learning about, this is what household bills look like, this is what you're going to be dealing with if you go to uni, these are the sort of things you're going to have, so people can get their head around. Because I know, just speaking from my own experience, I went to uni, didn't really have a clue about the student loan, just did it, and it was, and then that debt is now still with me, years into my career and things, and it maybe would help people reframe their thinking. I think as well, children see us, and we all do it. You just swipe to buy, swipe to buy, swipe to buy, and realizing that actually has a consequence that can build up, and then you're going to be faced with this huge bill, and to pay that huge bill, how are you going to manage it if this is your average UK salary and you're on around this average UK salary? how are you going to then manage to do that? I think, I'm speaking from a generation of people who, think a lot of us think nothing of throwing something on a credit card. It's that sort of thing. But then that probably could have been prevented with certain teaching in schools. I do think there are gaps with things like that. There's gaps with with the current day, like we said, AI. Is that being taught about? You're hearing more and more incidents about this cropping up in schools about AI being misused so negatively, and it can impact certain people in hugely negative ways for years and years to come afterwards. So I feel things like that, it's maybe having time to stop and go, right, is what we're doing now serving these children? Is this reflective of the world that we're in? Because a lot of the time, it's not.
And how are you able today to feed back those sorts of thoughts?
It's a funny one, really, isn't it? Because I suppose there's been a survey sent out recently by my union, which was able to fill some information like that in. There's been the odd thing like that where you can express your feelings on it, but inevitably we're following a structure that's been set, that is there for us to follow as teachers. And whilst there's some some maneuvering within that, there's still a strong element of things that have to be covered. You have to cover them legally. So again, there's not really anywhere I feel like I could go and say that and it massively change what we do. It would be speaking to your local MPs and things, but I feel sometimes with education, unless there's this mass uproar and this mass, revolt, I suppose, and just strike action and things, then it's just falling on deaf ears, really. I don't really know where I would, thinking of it, I don't really know where I would go to. As I say, I filled in a form recently from my teaching union, where it was like, have your feedback on teaching. So we can express that there. I suppose if you were to get Ofsteded, you would maybe express it there. But again, I don't know how far that would go.
How do you find those inspections, the Ofsted inspections?
I mean, we had one a year ago and it wasn't so bad, but in the past I found them really, really stressful. I think this year had we knew, well, it was last year, sorry, but we knew we were a really good school. We knew what we were doing was right. We knew it was working for the kids. We knew we had the results. When I was in another school where our results were a lot lower than the national average because of the cohort of pupils we had, it was terrifying and we were torn to shreds, and what we were doing wasn't good enough. But unfortunately, whatever we had have done, we still couldn't get the children to the end of year expectations and the levels they needed to be at, because they were not ready for those things. So in that case, we were absolutely torn to pieces, and unnecessarily so, I would say, because it was reflective. It wasn't necessarily reflective of the teaching. It was reflective to the area and the type of children that we had. And I think that's part of the problem as well, is, if I was to, compare my results with a school that I know my friend teaches in, our results would be completely different. But that's not to say that the work they're doing isn't just as amazing, because I'm sure it is, because they're having to get their children to a different level and they're seeing progress in such a different way. And that's the other thing, that's the progress. It's children have to do this and they have to do that to be age-related expectation, but children all achieve stuff so differently. I know, for example, from my own experience, like when I was in primary school, I was considered a really low ability child. I was nowhere near those age-related expectations. I remember when we got our SATs results, and my SATs results were really low, and I still remember that now. But then I've gone on to get a degree, to get a PGCE afterwards. My sister as well really struggled in school, and she's qualified, is a qualified nurse now, and she got through university. So I feel like some of these milestones that are set as well, it's just so hard because it's not, the schooling system isn't for everyone, and it's not always for children at that point in time as well. So I I started to get better when I was in high school. That was when my growth came. But until then, I'd been considered quite a low ability child. But I just maybe didn't have the skills to to maybe write it down onto paper or whatever. Um, but, my ideas were always good and things. But it was measured against these standards, and really we're doing that today. But I have conversations with my parents and I say these are where they should technically be, but to me that is not important. The importance is seeing that they are progressing from when they've started, so we get, so we've got an understanding of where they are at the start, we see where they are at the end. Every child makes huge progress every single year, but it doesn't always fit up to those standards that are put into place by the government and education department and so on. It doesn't always align, and I think that can be quite disheartening for children as well as parents. The children know when they're, if they're getting given a slightly different worksheet and things, and it's, or if if they read the report and they see they're not at the expected standard at the end of the year as they get older and things, if they're able to view them. It just, I don't know, I just feel there are some things which are still quite archaic, and then there are still some things that work really well. It's a juxtaposition, I suppose, because you've got some things that you think, yeah, this is great. So for example, the phonics scheme that we're doing with our children, it's really regimented, it's really rigid, there's not much movement within that, but it works really well and we get the results. And the children then, by the end of reception, are all readers. They can all read independently, which is what we want. So then you can sort of loosen that a little bit then, and then the creativity can come in a little bit more and so on. So that sort of thing works. But then obviously there's there's other things that really don't work. And, as I've just said then, these expectations at the end of the year are just not suited for everyone. It just can't be that way.
So, with the benefit of hindsight, how would
Mhm.
you have preferred to be supported when you were a kid?
I think I think it was a very different sort of landscape when I was in school. I mean, I was just considered the naughty child in my class. Really, I made a joke with some of the parents about this because I took my kids on a school trip the other day, and my mum came with me and had commented on how well our kids were in my class. And how I was nothing like that as a child, because I was always seen as that naughty child in school. But I think, it's sort of, if that isn't working, for that child, if doing, if that writing isn't working for them, scrap it. How else can they do it? How else can they show you their understanding? So, if it's science, can they show you through experiments? And then you can say, well, they are where they should be in science because they've got that understanding. They've just not recorded it in the right way. They have got a great understanding of history, but they haven't got the ability to. Their writing skills aren't on par with that. So it's just. I feel like if there was a bit more freedom like that for me, and for children of today as well, there would be a bit more of a. I don't know. I think that would just work better, that it wasn't so rigid in that sense. And as I say, like from my experience as a child, with hindsight, it would have just been allowing me that time, to talk and to show and to, you know, rather than working in a silent environment. That did not work for me. I needed that partner talk. I needed to converse with other people. I still do now as a teacher. I still need to do that as a teacher. I still need to just, discuss with my colleagues, like, right, what do you think about this? Do you think we should scrap this? I did this morning. This didn't work too well. Should we change it? I still need that feedback from other people, and I know most people do. So I suppose having time for those sort of things. for those conversations, for those, for that freedom to be, they're not going to be able to do that way. You show me how you want to do it, and let them lead in that sense. But time doesn't allow for it. If it wouldn't line up, if they've shown that, and maybe still wouldn't line up to age-related expectations that you would be assessing against. So, I suppose the freedom for you as a professional has been taken away somewhat then.
So this freedom, it's not just about how you're learning, it's also about directing your learning. Is that what you're talking about?
Say that again, sorry.
The freedom that you're talking about, it's not just about how you're learning, quiet versus collaborative.
Yeah.
But also having some say in what you're learning, having some self-determination.
I think so, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, there has to be things that the children have to cover because they need to know it. We need it to get through life. But I do think a little bit more freedom in certain aspects of the curriculum wouldn't be a bad thing. I think it would be a good thing. I think that I mean, for example, we've recently started in our school a forest school. So we've got a big field with our school, which is slightly away from the school. But there are children over there who have really struggled with their communication this year with me. Obviously, we're talking children who are, age 4 and 5. But being over there in a different setting, out the classroom, having more freedom to sort of lead what they wanted to do. It was their choice. There was loads of different things for them to do. They could invent things themselves. Having that freedom, I got stuff out of the children I hadn't got all year. So that was sort of maybe May time, and I had conversations with some of the children that barely spoken to me, or it would have to be me drawing it out of them. They were coming to me with things, and I think that was a really good eye-opener of seeing just how much you can still get out of them. It might not look like they're working because they're not sitting at a desk and they've not got a pencil in their hand or a pen in their hand, and they're not putting their numbers in squares on a page, but the stuff I got out of the children with that free and that the different things, that outdoor learning was amazing. And I saw different sides of the children through that. Through a lot of the children, I saw some children who were really painfully shy come massively out the shells, and as a result their friendships have got better. They've developed more friendships. The school trip I was just mentioning before, we did that in a place called it's a farm near our school, not too far from our school, about 40 minutes, but we went there and seeing the animals, watching a comedy show with sheep, these sort of things, you see the children's sense of humour coming out, they're still laughing about some of the things the sheep did now, a week on. And that's just, that's great, to see. But again, I think even things like trips, because of funding cuts are happening less and less now. We used to go on 2 or 3 trips a year. Now we're down to 1, and that is because of funding cuts again. And so it's or more to fit into your schedule and things as well. So I do think freedom in many ways can be beneficial. Freedom as a teacher, freedom for the children, all while still having healthy boundaries in place, I suppose.
So you've introduced the forest school and you've seen some real benefits from it. What other things have you seen elsewhere that you'd love to introduce?
As in other things in addition to a forest school?
Exactly.
Well, the forest school has been amazing. That has been great. Something that we wanted to do more as a year group, but again, it's getting it through all the admin side of it, which again is more pressure on teachers and things, is just having little local trips out where we just go for a walk around our local area and things like that. Be having that ability, as I just mentioned, that trip then, if we could have more trips, that would be great. but there's a lot of even with our trip to the farm, it came with so much admin because of allergies and things like that. The paperwork was huge that came with it. But I do think like more trips would be great. I think, as we've said, having maybe more people come into the school, more ability for us to go out the school, would be great as well. I think Forest School for us has been a really, really good place to start though, because it's definitely um, allowed us as teachers to see other side to our children that we have, and I suppose come up with more ideas for things that we want to do going forward.
Amazing. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you think needs covering?
No, I don't think so. I feel obviously it's just teaching is one of those things that is ever changing. We're coming up against new things in the world all the time. And I think if there was a little bit more freedom for teachers to sort of be able to do those to cover those sort of things, and if that topic in history didn't get covered, so be it. This is more important. I think having that freedom to do that would be the one thing that I would say. When you asked about my takeaways, that would be the one thing that I would like to see a change in, noticing how the world's changing and using that initiative to go, right, okay, come on, we need to, invest in more iPads, and having the funds there to do that would obviously be great. But we don't live in an ideal world, unfortunately, do we? So, and it doesn't always seem to be the top of any government's agenda, although it often is said that it is. I often don't think it is, to be honest. Or if it is, it doesn't feel like that in the school. We feel like we're having a lot of decisions made by us, by people who've never probably other than going to school themselves as kids, have probably never stepped foot in school as an adult and don't have a real understanding of what the day-to-day is like. It's just, oh, just do this and just add this and just add that on. And, teachers work hard. We're not paid in the same way a banker or a footballer is paid. We're not doing it for huge amounts of money. I know we get more time off, but a lot of that time off, like in the summer, I'm going to have to go into school to change because I'm moving classroom. In other half terms, it's been where people are writing reports and things. So it's a lot. I think a lot is put on us by a lot of people who don't really know how a school runs these days.
So to sum things up, we would have better education if teachers and pupils had more freedom.
I would say so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's only my humble opinion, but I do think it would be a good place to start anyway. But to have that freedom, there are other things that needs to be put in place, unfortunately. Finance being one of them, one of the huge contributors, and yeah. So I think
Not your humble opinion, your learned opinion.
yeah, my old opinion after many moons.
Drew, thanks so much for taking the time to share your thoughts.
No worries. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on.
Great. Have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, you too. Speak soon. Bye.